big thing that was on my mind the entire time from when I started looking for a bootcamp all the way through was, am I going to get a job at the end of this? I signed a job offer today. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jenny, and I generally do more vlog style videos, but today I thought I'd sit down with you and talk a little bit about my experience changing from a career in social services to a career in software engineering via a bootcamp. The reason I decided to do this now is because it's actually been almost exactly 2 years since I started my bootcamp. To celebrate that occasion, I thought I would do a little sit down video and just talk to you more about the experience and answer some questions that I've gotten a lot. When I first started the process of considering a career change, I was always searching on YouTube to try to find examples of people talking about their experiences because I didn't know anyone personally in my life who had made a career shift like this, and I really wanted some firsthand anecdotal information about what it might be like so that I could decide whether it was going to be possible for me. So I'll kind of go through my story and like the process around how I made the decision to make the career change and what that experience was like for me, but then I'll also sprinkle in some practical tips along the way of things that I've learned about how to make the career change. Also, you can probably see behind me there's some construction going on my street. I'm trying very hard to not talk while they're making beeping noises, but I do apologize in advance if there's any background noise. I've waited a while for them to stop, and at this point I just have to film this video or it is literally never going to happen. To get started, I'm gonna take you back to 2020 Jenny. My husband and I moved to Berlin, Germany. I think it might have actually been January 2021. And we did that for him to pursue his MBA program. And before we had moved, I had been working as a immigration specialist at a local refugee resettlement agency, basically social services nonprofit. And I've been doing that for about 4 years. I had an undergraduate degree in international studies, and I had also recently completed my master's degree in refugee protection. So as you can tell, I was very much on a track to go into nonprofit work, and that's still very much my passion. But at that point, when we moved to Germany, I wasn't really able to bring my career with me, unfortunately. The work that I've been doing previously was a skill set that was pretty specific to the United States. And then on top of that, I was really feeling a sense of disenchantment with the nonprofit work that I'd been doing. I felt that I was having an impact on an individual basis, which is obviously super, super important. I really wanted to go in a direction with my career where I was having more systemic change. That led me to trying to figure out what that could look like for me, both in the short term in Berlin and then in the long term in my life. While the circumstances of my experience are very unique, I'm sure you can relate with the feeling of not being completely satisfied with the direction that your career is taking and either looking for something more in terms of a challenge, in terms of compensation, or in terms of flexibility. And those are all things that I was looking for and things that a lot of people are looking for when they are considering making a career change to software engineering or to technology more broadly. So at that point, I started doing some online courses in data analysis, and in the process of doing that, I did a Python course and I absolutely loved it. The thought of being able to just actually build something, not with my hands necessarily, although I guess you need typing, but to build something that didn't exist before was really appealing to me, and I really enjoyed it. That was pretty much it. From there, I was like, I think I want to pursue software engineering, and I started looking into what was the best route to make that career shift. I was really hesitant to go back to university again. I've already spent a lot of time and money on my education, and I was hoping for something that would be a little bit quicker in the short term because I also needed to start working as soon as possible. Originally, I started with just self-study. I did that for a while, but I was having a really hard time staying motivated, and I really felt like having the external validation of a group of people working alongside me and having the community, being part of a group of other people who are also making this career shift, and then also having the resource of the teachers, being able to ask them questions. I just felt like all of that would be really helpful for my learning journey and help me get to a point where I was job ready faster. So I started looking into boot camps. I did compare a lot of different boot camps in Germany. A few things that I considered were the start date. That was super important to me because, like I said, I was trying to get started working as soon as possible. Secondly, I was looking for the best intersection of cost and quality. I wanted to pay as little as possible but get the highest quality course at the same time, where I knew that I could count on by the end of the course being actually job ready and competitive in the software engineering engineering job market. I was also originally really looking for a bootcamp that had name recognition both in Germany and in the US, because I knew that eventually my husband and I would probably be moving back to the United States. I wanted recruiters, when they were reading my resume, to recognize the name of the bootcamp. In the end, I did not end up choosing one that did have name recognition in the US, but I will say it's very funny. I was on a call with a Google recruiter actually in my job search at one point, and she said that one of the things that drew her to my resume was the fact that the name of the bootcamp that I went to was unfamiliar to her. So I guess that worked out in a positive way for me, even though that was not my intention. The bootcamp that I decided to go with is called Le Wagon. Originally, I was a little bit put off by the name, I'm not gonna lie to you, but there is a good story behind the name and you can look that up if you want. It originated in France, but it had really good reviews, and there was a cohort starting pretty soon in Berlin. And the best thing was that I could potentially apply for an education voucher through the German government to have the course fees completely covered. That was definitely intriguing to me because the budget was tight at that point in time. I did in the end get approved for the education voucher, which was such a blessing, and I'm so grateful for that. But it was quite a bit of a time investment, and I ended up actually having to delay the start of the bootcamp until the next cohort after the one I had originally applied for. In that time, I had even more time to focus on self-studying, and I feel like that really gave me an advantage going into the bootcamp because I already had a pretty good framework for a lot of the concepts that we were going to go into in more depth. I definitely felt more prepared, and it showed in the work that I was able to do and the quality of our final project. So if you are thinking about doing a bootcamp, one thing that I really recommend is giving yourself a month or so prior to the start of your bootcamp to do some self-study. And that can look different for everyone, but what I did specifically was I worked through Harvard's CS50 course. It is completely free and available online. You can get a certificate from Harvard at the end of the course if you submit your final project. You don't need to pay for it, you can just do it completely for free. And I actually never even ended up finishing it and getting the certificate, and I still feel like the information was exceptionally helpful for me in my learning journey. There's tons and tons of resources out there. I will actually link a bunch of really awesome resources down in the description box. So if you're just starting in your journey, you can go check those out and do some self-studying of your own. That brings me up to when I started the bootcamp. The bootcamp was 9 weeks long, and I started in the beginning of June 2021. And the main language that we learned at Le Wagon was Ruby, and then we learned the Ruby on Rails framework. We also learned HTML, CSS, and really basic JavaScript. But I would say like the majority of the knowledge that I took out of the bootcamp was just general coding best practices. So we learned a lot about if statements and control flow and the model view controller design pattern, things like that. There is a man outside my window holding a baby carrier with looks like garbage in it and singing at the top of his lungs. I don't really believe it matters what language you use to learn to code. The most important thing is learning the design patterns, the different technologies and things that go into making a software program. And you can use any language to learn those skills, if that makes sense. So when I was doing the self-study, the Harvard program is using C. The bootcamp, I was learning Ruby. And then when I graduated the bootcamp, I taught myself Python for one of the job interviews I had. At my first job, I was using Java. At my second job, where I am now, I'm using C# and TypeScript. So really, I've been all over the place, and I think that's totally doable and a very realistic career path. So expect to be changing languages. I had a really great experience at the bootcamp. It was definitely hard. Like that was how I spent pretty much all of my time for the 9 weeks that I was in the bootcamp. I did not have a lot of free time, but I also did not study coding things outside of the bootcamp curriculum. It is so much new information all at one time, and especially if you're like me and you're coming not from a technical background, it's also a totally new way of thinking, and it can be really tiring. It's honestly like learning a new language. I also loved being part of a community. That's one thing that I will say is so nice about doing a bootcamp, is that not only are you part of a community of learners, which is super helpful, but you're also part of a group of people who are going through this huge life change, huge transition at the same time as you and can relate to what that's like. And it can be really discouraging at times. It can be really hard. So it's really nice to make friends who are also going through that experience and can kind of give you pep talks and sympathize with the things that you're going through in the job search and all of that. I had been looking and applying for jobs already because we're nearing the end of the boot camp, and I was feeling really discouraged because I hadn't heard back from any of them, and I was reading job descriptions and being like, I don't even know what some of these things are. Nobody is ever gonna hire me. And one of my group mates was like, think back to when you first started the boot camp. So that was like 8 weeks ago, and how much you've learned between then and now. And so just imagine how 9 weeks from today, how much more you will have learned. And that just really put into perspective how quickly I was picking up on the concepts, and really gave me hope for the future, and that I was gonna actually be able to learn and prepare and actually be hired for a job. So the big thing that was on my mind the entire time from when I started looking for a boot camp all the way through was, am I going to get a job at the end of this? In my experience, the boot camp really did prepare me for my first job. I also got my first job through a career week at my boot camp. The company that I ended up getting hired on with was very familiar with the curriculum of the boot camp that I went through. They had hired graduates from there before, and they knew what to expect, and that was both soothing to me because I knew that they knew where I was actually at knowledge-wise, but then I also think that it helped to get me hired in the first place because they kind of knew what to expect. I've actually job searched twice now in the 2 years that I have been in software engineering, and the second time I was not hired by a company that had familiarity with bootcamp grads. So it's definitely possible, but I will just say that that was, I think, one of the contributing factors. But generally speaking, I feel like I was in a really good place to continue my own education as well. Like I had a good enough framework of all the different concepts that I was set up really well to continue my learning path and continue to grow. And then I also had my community that I could continue to rely on, both for networking and also for continued education. After the bootcamp finished, my cohort members and I continued to meet up several times a week actually at coffee shops around Berlin to study together and to talk about our job searches. It was so encouraging and really helpful for me to stay motivated in my job search and prepare for my interviews. So I'm gonna rapid fire my best tips for the bootcamp. Make sure that you are spending your free time outside of the bootcamp doing things that are not on your computer, not on your phone, and fill you up, because the bootcamp is going to drain you in so many ways, and you need to make sure that you refill your cup during your off time so that you can show up rested, ready to learn. Work out, sleep enough hours. Make sure that you don't schedule any vacations or doctor's appointments or whatever, if at all avoidable, during the bootcamp week, so you can just fully focus, and you need to be present every single day of the bootcamp. Invest in your cohort members, because they will continue to stick with you after the bootcamp, and those relationships are so important. Don't be applying to jobs or even thinking about the job search too much during the first 3 quarters of the bootcamp. Just focus on what you're learning, forget about job searching because it'll just stress you out, and just really be present and absorb everything. Then you'll be the most prepared for the job search when it comes. Towards the end of the bootcamp, start to apply for jobs immediately, just so you can get some practice, even if you don't feel like you're ready, because I guarantee you're not gonna feel like you're ready, but you still might get hired. So you should try. I have not felt ready for either of the jobs that I've gotten post bootcamp, but I still got hired and I'm still making money and I'm still growing. So that should not prevent you from applying. Informational interviews. I would just reach out to people on LinkedIn and explain my career transition and what my career goals were, and ask if they would sit down for a Zoom meeting with me just to talk about their experience and give me some tips. And they did not all respond, that's okay. But the ones that did, we had really fruitful and helpful conversations, and I'm still connected with them. That I felt really helped me to kind of narrow down what I was looking for in a job and what kind of things were important to me in a future employer. And then also to prepare myself for the job search, because I would ask them questions about their interview styles, like what kind of questions they would ask, what kind of things I should be studying after the boot camp, what they thought was the best use of my time, things like that. So I definitely felt like it helped me to be more prepared towards the end of the boot camp to actually be ready to job search. And then lastly, put yourself out there. Answer questions, talk to the teachers, go to the events, because you never know when one of those connections or conversations could potentially lead to a job opportunity. It was the final week of the boot camp. It was career week, and there was an event for this company called Get Your Guide that interested me because they created this travel product, and I love to travel. So I was like, okay, I'm interested in this company. I'm gonna go to this event. The event was on Zoom, and I was the only person who turned on my camera out of all of the students who joined from their respective computers, which I knew immediately was gonna make me stand out. And then I also made sure to prepare some questions ahead of time to ask that were specific to the company. So I did some research on the company beforehand and thought up some questions. I also made sure to share a little bit about my story that would stick with them, because I think what's really important in job hunting is to make yourself memorable. So like I said, I worked with refugees before, and that's memorable. You know, whenever I tell people that I worked with refugees, they're really interested, they want to know more about it, and it's super natural for me to share that because it is so intrinsic to my career journey and my long-term career goals. So I just explained the work that I've been previously doing and the motivations behind my career shift and what my long-term career goals were. And then I immediately reached out to the recruiter after the end of the event and said that I was super interested in the company and I was wondering if she could tell me more about the positions that they had. And that led to her sending me a Calendly link, scheduling the first get to know you interview, and then it just kind of went from there. Even if you have the skills, if they don't know who you are, the likelihood of them pulling your resume or going to your LinkedIn and reaching out to you is low. So you need to make sure that people see you and hear you and are interested in knowing more about you. Also, small caveat, I will say I am not a naturally outgoing person. So going to networking events and talking about myself to people I don't know is extremely stressful for me, and I totally relate if you feel the same way. I think for me, what helped was that I was just really desperate for a job. I needed to start making income, and I could not afford to spend 6 months job searching. So I just had to put myself out there. And as hard as it is, I just want to encourage you, if you are also feeling nervous to put yourself out there, that the worst that can happen is that they don't follow up, or they're not interested in pursuing you as a candidate. And while that can hurt on a personal level, it is not going to set you back in your job search. So you just have to focus on your goal, which is getting a job. So what was the interview process like? I had my first phone screening with the recruiter. It was just very informal. I tried to keep it casual and just chatty with the recruiter and just bond on a personal level. And then I also made sure to have some good questions to ask her at the end of the interview that were kind of a range. So I asked some more culture fit questions, and then I also asked some more technical questions, which, believe me, I felt like I was just making things up as I went with the technical questions, but I really wanted to show that I was serious, and I think it did leave a good impression. And let me know if you're interested in knowing more about the specific questions that I asked or got asked, and the granular details of the interview process. I can definitely go into that in more detail in another video. If that interests you, just let me know in the comments. After the phone screening, she sent me a link to an online technical assessment. I think I had 180 minutes or something like that to complete the technical assessment. It was in the language of my choice, so I did do it in Ruby since that was the language that I was most comfortable with after the boot camp. I actually completely bombed that technical assessment. There was one thing early on in the problem that I missed, and I could not find the error, and so I was not able to run the compiler to test the code, and basically just got to a point where I was completely stuck. I was running out of time, and what I decided to do was write all the code without being able to test it, just free-flowing write, and then go through and annotate it with a lot of comments describing my thought process. And I did that because the recruiter had been very clear with me that what they were looking for was someone who can clearly communicate, is a good problem solver, and is a quick learner. So I thought, even though I'm not gonna be able to finish solving this problem and actually show them the depths of my technical capacity, at least I can show them those things. I sent it into the recruiter, and then I followed up with her immediately via email, and I told her what I thought the problem was technically with the code. And I asked her if she could send me a copy of my code so that I could keep working on it. She did end up sending me the code. I did end up working through it, and I eventually solved it and got to the solution. And then I sent that back to her, and I said, I don't know if you're able to take this into consideration in your decision, but I just wanted you to know that I did get to the bottom of it, and here's my code just in case. I don't know if they ever did review my solution, but in the end, she did call me back in for another interview, so something I did along the lines in there made up for the fact that I got a 0 on the technical assessment. The next step was a live technical assessment with 2 senior engineers from the company. It was also on Zoom. They sent me a link to some kind of online ID where they could see what I was coding. And I asked the recruiter ahead of time to give me some tips on what to expect for that so that I could prepare. She did tell me that what was really important to them was to see how I communicated. She was like, even if you are, coming to a dead end and you don't know how to solve a problem, ask good questions, communicate with the interviewers, try to explain your problem-solving process, and that will take you a long ways. So I did that, and I felt like it definitely helped. They even gave me some tips to solve the problem, and in the end I didn't get it completely finished, but I felt like I really bonded with the interviewers and I demonstrated that I could ask intelligent questions. I was very unsure if I was going to pass the technical assessment with the engineers, but I did in the end, which I was so grateful for. And then the next round of interviews was an interview with the hiring manager who was interested in hiring me. That was just a culture fit interview. And then after that, my final interview was with the CTO of the company, and then I got the job. I worked at Get Your Guide for only 7 months, and the reason that I eventually left the company was that my husband got a job back in the US, and we made the kind of tough decision to move back to the US from Berlin at that point. So that meant that within a year of graduating the bootcamp, I was job searching again. Spoiler alert, I did find another job, and I'm very happy there. My second job I actually got via an application that I did on LinkedIn through Easy Apply, which I never in a million years would have expected to receive a response from an Easy Apply application. So that was, I think, kind of a fluke, but I used a lot of the same principles that I used with my first job search and my second job search. I networked, I continued to self-study, definitely spent a lot of time in the first few months of job searching just studying coding challenges and practicing. I did also do an interview prep course. I don't know that really ended up being that useful for me because the job that I have now, I applied for in the first week of the interview prep course, and I actually dropped out of the interview prep course before the end because I started working. It was one of the requirements of the interview prep course to apply for a certain number of jobs per week, which is what prompted me to submit that LinkedIn Easy Apply application for the job that I have now. So I guess in that way it did pay off. But there are resources like that out there as well if you feel like you need a little bit more support. And I can also tell you more about that experience if you want to know. There's so many more things I could share. So my first job search took me like a week between the time that I started searching and the time that I actually got connected with my future employer. The second time it took me a lot longer. I started job searching not very seriously in May of 2022, and then I started my job in November of 2022. But I won't say that I was super serious about job searching for a lot of that time, and mostly that comes down to imposter syndrome, honestly. I really felt that I was not going to be competitive in the US market, and I was really worried about putting myself out there, and that really held me back from trying. So my last piece of advice for this video would be to not sell yourself short. It can be really hard to make the switch to software engineering because you feel like up until now, I've been doing this for 2 years and I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. And that's just gonna kind of stick with you. I think the key is learning how to get over that and just do things anyways. And you'd be surprised how much you can get done by just trying. Just put yourself out there, just show up, just do the thing. You will not regret it. And you might regret it if you don't try. Whether that applies to you choosing to make the career switch in the first place or applying for your first job, I hope that you feel encouraged. And again, I just want to stress that having a community is super important. So if you need any more support, I'm here to answer your questions. Just reach out in the comments and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about my experience. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and do that. I will say again, this is not the type of video that I normally make. I generally make vlogs of my life. My husband and I are currently traveling all over the US, working remotely, and I'm vlogging that whole experience, so I think it's pretty fun to watch, so you should subscribe for that. But I am also going to start making more career software engineering type videos. If you guys are interested in that, let me know and subscribe either way, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!